right, welcome back everyone for another episode of Dollar Bin Digging. This is the video and article that I do for comicbookinvest.com where I tell you about those books you can probably still find tucked away in those cheap boxes, those discount bins, based off of some of the recent news, rumors, announcements, things going on TV or in the movies, and mostly things going on in the actual comics that came out the last week or so. Hopefully you're enjoying this series as well as everything else here on the channel. Please let me know what you think in the comments down below. Make sure that you like, you subscribe, you hit the alert button so you don't miss anything. Keep telling your friends so we can keep growing the channel. And if you want to see this week's selection of books, I'm kind of playing a little bit of catch up because I didn't get a Dollar Bin Digging last week. So I'm going to cover last week's new releases as well as this week's and give you a rundown on those with some interesting first appearances in there. So hopefully you're on board for that as it's going to start up right after this short little break. All right, so we're going to start off this week and actually just focus in on those comics because, like I said, I missed last week, so I got to catch up on last week as well as cover the new releases for this week with some interesting stuff that dropped in there. We're going to start with last week's books first. So, starting off over on DC, we're going to look at issue 23 of Titans. And this was new last week. And inside this book, we've seen a villain I haven't seen pop up in a while now. And that is this lady right here, Orca. Remember her? I haven't seen Orca in a while, but then again, I'm not consistently reading Titans, so I don't know if she's been popping up more regularly or not. I just know it. She was in last week's issue, and it got me thinking that we should be looking for her first. So, who is Orca? Orca is a villain that's been around for a while now, actually going back into the 90s. She first showed up in Batman, issue 579. I'm sorry, May of 2000. Just missed the 90s. May of 2000 is when she first popped up in this Larry Hama and Scott McDaniel run of Batman. Like I said, issue 579. Right here on the cover, you can see her, but she's also right in the book, starting this little story arc about the Orca running a couple of issues here. This book I'm not going to say it's expensive, but it may not be $1 at all places. Some people actually like Orca and will charge you like $5 for it. It's still not expensive, is my point. It's still a pretty cheap book and still a pretty cheap first appearance. As you can see, copies selling for as much as $5 to $8. Wow. Copies listed in that same kind of range of $4 to $5 up to $8. You can see there's a very fine copy at my comic shop that they're looking for $8.40. I don't know. Just grab one of the other ones for $5. That said, Orca is still a cheap first that you can go and dig out of a box if you're interested in that. If you're keeping up with New Gods, we got the 6th issue of that maxi series for the new run of New Gods. And right there on the cover is the Black Racer. Seems like they're going and hitting up all the old favorites, all the old New Gods from the classic series. But apart from being on the cover, Black Racer is inside as well. Art on this is pretty trippy. It's pretty, I want to say artistic. It's an interesting read. I'll put it that way. And Black Racer is shown here in a few different panels and forms throughout this, while the more recent, before this, the version of Black Racer looked more 90s style, cybernetic, armored up, glowy thing, or I should say 2000s, because I believe this is more the New 52 run version of the character. But you see the difference here, where it was more abstract in the current run as this armored version we see here from that New 52 time frame. But the character himself actually goes all the way back to the start of the New Gods, back in issue 3, back in 1971. So right there on the cover, yep, he's got his skis and he's got his poles. It's the Black Racer, and he is Death. Odd concept. Odd concept to me. Why Death would need skis. But hey, Kirby was being Kirby. Weird, wild, cosmic stuff. And again, apart from being on the cover, he is right there in the early part of the issue and kind of introducing himself. So if you like your idea of Death on skis, Black Racer is your guy. And despite the fact that this book came out in 1971, it can still be found at a relatively cheap price if you're not too worried about getting a 9.8 near mint copy. Because you can see here, copies can sell from like $8 to $11 for you. Those, kind of a mid-grade, even more on the lower grade side. Get your fines and your very goods. Again, there's nothing wrong with collecting a well-loved book. You can always hope to get a better copy somewhere else, but pick up the cheap ones until you get a nicer copy. And you can even see copies listed for $9, $10, $15. Still not super duper expensive for a book that's over, what is it, like 50 years old now? Over 50 years old. So with that, keep an eye out for it, because you can find some of these old New Gods books just kind of buried in those boxes out there, because yes, they've come around the spec cycle before a couple of times, but much like the Eternals, that interest has kind of waned and risen very, very often. So you can find some of this old stuff out there for decent prices. Moving over to Marvel now for last week. Marvel last week, we had the latest issue of the Insurgent Iron Man. I think it's just called Iron Man, but they got the Insurgent title on there, so I'm going to read the whole thing. But issue 8, we see the Winter Guard showing up again. I know I did a whole show on the Winter Guard not that long ago, so we're just going to kind of quick recap one of the characters. Even though I just talked about her, I don't know, a few months ago, we'll just quickly remind anybody who might have missed that show about Red Widow here right in the front. I covered the other two as well, so go back to that old episode. I think it's like 287 or something like that. I don't know. It's a few months ago. You could find that episode in the, in the playlist down below. But for you newer viewers, Red Widow showing up in Iron Man with the Winter Guard. She actually first appeared in a more recent book, the most recent run of Avengers in issue 10 from 2018. So it's still a handful of years ago. But this was Avengers number 10, the 700th issue, because legacy numbering, Marvel has to be all confusing with their legacy numbering. And in here, easily, her first appearance. Don't need anything we need to argue. There she is. They even give a little Dropbox window explaining who she is. There you go. I don't care if you want to argue cameo, full, or anything like that. I'm just saying, there she is, being introduced in this book. So this is an anniversary issue, so the cover price is a bit more, but don't let that scare you off, because again, it's a bit of an older issue, and there were plenty of them printed. As you can see here, as copies can sell for like $7, but they also sell for $1 or $1.79. There are multiple covers on this as well. Again, anniversary issue, as you might expect, a lot of covers, open order as well as incentives. But we're just talking about the cover A here, and you can probably find some of the other open order covers for just as cheap, as copies listed are still under that, $5.99 cover price. So it would have cost $5.99 at cover, but look, copies listed are even $4, $5, yeah, it's $6. Point being, I'm sure you can find a cheap copy if you go digging hard enough. And there you go, you'll get your first Widow. Also last week, Weapon X-Men number 4 came out. I'm not keeping up with this title, even though it's only 4 issues in, because, I don't know, just the concept just seemed kind of lazy to me. Hey, let's just take our most popular X characters and make some tough team of Cable and Deadpool and Wolverine. I don't know. That said, here it's all right. And this issue was kind of interesting, considering they bring in a huge mech. I mean, we got Red Ronin here being brought back, which, I don't know, it's kind of a fun idea. I haven't seen Red Ronin in a while. And, yeah, oh, sorry, I don't have the interior panel, but you can see Red Ronin right there on the cover. And Red Ronin is a character, again, that's been around a while, going back to those Shogun Warrior days, and Godzilla, which is definitely my wheelhouse. That's the stuff that I love from back in the day. So Red Ronin it's kind of one of those Shogun Warriors, really. But he first showed up sort of in a cameo, we would say, in the October 1977 issue of Godzilla, King of the Monsters, issue 6, as we saw some spec, like details of the huge mech, and then we do see the mech here as our man Rob is looking to go and kind of like steal it in this issue. But while it's not in full, fighting mode or moving around, that is the huge mech of Red Ronin right there. So it is in this issue. Call it what you want. You want to call it cameo? Go ahead. I don't care what you call it. I just call it there Red Ronin is inside this issue, and pay appropriately, however you feel comfortable. Because this is not that expensive, but it can get pricey because it is an old Godzilla issue. Copies can sell as cheap as $6 to $9, but there could be copies looking for more in that $15, $20, even $30 and $40 for those higher grades. So keep that in mind as well. If we're talking about cheap box digging, you may not get the nicest copy, and you got to be all right with that. Again, we're talking cheap. It's a placeholder. You find a nicer copy later if you want. Now, with that said, call it a cameo, whatever. On the cover of the next issue, there it is, Red Ronin in action. So in issue 7, look for this one too, obviously. And surprisingly, this one is actually cheaper than the last one. But there we go. Red Ronin in action, walking around inside this, even though Rob's kind of knocked out. Hijinks ensue. It's a kaiju book. Hijinks ensue. With that said, again, look at the prices here. Prices are cheaper. 2 books, issues 7 and 14, went for $4, or $10 alone, $5 alone. Copies listed, yeah, $6, $10, $13. It depends. I mean, we're talking about a book from the 70s after all. So again, conditions going to play a role in the price that's being asked. But yeah, see what you could find when you're out there. Now, that was last week's stuff. But before we get to this week's stuff, I want to remind any of you out there who need your supplies, use my code RENA10 over at BCW to save 10% off your entire order. Your bags, your boards, your long boxes, your short boxes, CGC boxes, your top loaders, pages for cards, top loaders for cards. Basically anything to keep your comics or collectibles safe. You can find a product over there and save yourself some money while you do it by using my code RENA10 to save 10% off. You help out the channel, you get a discount. You got nothing to lose if you're making that purchase anyway. So with that said, let's look at this week's books and take a look over at DC at Mr. Terrific Year 1. Now, I wasn't really excited for a Mr. Terrific Year 1. I get it. They're releasing the issue because the character's going to play a role in the new Superman movie. So they want to expand his profile. I get it. I like Mr. Terrific. Nothing against him as a character. I just don't know if I really need a 6-issue mini focusing just on him. I like him more in a team role, personally. That said, in this issue, we see an old villain popping up here, and that's this guy right here with his army comrades or whatever. This guy goes by the name of Cormorant, I think is how we go. He's again an older character, a hired assassin that was originally introduced to assassinate Batgirl way back in the day. We're talking about March of 1980. So in Detective Comics, what is this, issue 491, in one of the many stories, because Detective at the time had a lot of stories. It was almost an anthology book of Batman. And one of the last issues, the assassination of Batgirl is in here, and it's this character, Cormorant, who is basically, he was holding a little girl hostage, like threatening her, and then he did fire and take a shot at her and looks on. The story plays out over the next couple issues, I believe. Definitely into the next one, it continues, but here we go. This is the introduction of this Cormorant character. And yes, it's an old issue of Detective, but it's not one of those famous or collectible issues. So you can find copies, out there for $7 or so. Yes, you might see it for 15. Copies listed could be as cheap as $5 or go up to $12. It's still not one of those major keys in any way. I mean, Cormorant is what he is. He's a small-time character. And if you want to go collect a small-time first, you can. And that's what I'm telling you to do. Keep an eye out for it because it's a kind of fun little scavenger hunt thing for you to do. Ties into the books we're reading today. Go find a first appearance in an old back issue box. While you're flipping for other stuff anyway. Now, one more DC book for this week that I want to cover is Green Lantern issue 23. So the newest issue of Green Lantern, yes, Spectre is returning in here, and Hal's history with the Spectre, etc. But we're not here to talk about Spectre right this second. I want to talk about Hal's crew as he's down here in this it's kind of like his hellscape or wherever the hell they are. We got Phantom Stranger. We got Nort hanging out with him. That's right, Nort of Nort swimsuit issue fame. I know you guys all chased that swimsuit issue last, I think it was a year or two ago, with the Villa Lobos cover and Wonder Woman. Everybody loved that book. But here we go. Nort, who's, he's a lantern. He's an interesting lantern, mustachioed and all. Nort goes back a ways. First introduced in Justice League International back in 1987, issue 10. Easy book for you to go and find. A lot of these Justice League books are in those discount and cheap boxes, so you can find a lot of this stuff for $1 or less. I'm serious. You flip past this stuff time and time again. But look for this cover. Remember it, because this Super Friends look that they have with a big rainbow background, this is the first appearance of Nort, introduced here, coming out of a little pipe shaft. I don't know what the heck he's doing, but yes, looks like a weird teddy bear. They gave him a mustache over the years to cover up that that weird lip thing he's got going there. But hey, Nort, your Green Lantern of the day. Again, this book is super cheap. You could find this for next to nothing. Look, copy sold for $1.35, $2. One sold for $4. Seaman sold in lots as well. You'll see like a whole run of Justice League International sell for like $5. Copies individually listed for $3 to $5. Not a pricey book at all, and it is Nort's first appearance. So with that, He's not the only character that showed up in this issue as part of the super squad that Green Lantern's got going on down there. As before he faces off with the Spectre, as I don't know if you noticed him in the background, but Zoriel, I don't know if I'm saying his name. I think it's Zoriel, the Angel, going back to those Grant Morrison days, is also part of his squad down there. And yeah, there again, there's Phantom Stranger hanging out with him there too. But we're not talking Phantom Stranger. He goes way, way back, and you're not finding a Phantom Stranger first for that. Maybe we can get a later version, but I decided to skip that angle and stick with Zoriel. So Zoriel, Angel came down, JLA 6, the Grant Morrison run with Howard Porter. Great run if you haven't read it. Go take a look. You could find lots and runs of these for very, very cheap if you haven't read it before. This is from 1997. And here, falling down to Earth and meeting Martian Manhunter under the ocean is Zoriel, as he's made flesh, made form, physical form. Copies again, very, very cheap. Look here, $20 bought somebody basically a dozen issues of the run. That's the only example of a sale I could find, because this wasn't listed for individual sale, or nobody picked one up individually, this particular issue. And listings, most of them are in the $2 to $3 kind of range. But yes, there might be a $8.99 ask out there. So again, it's not a huge deal or a huge first, but it is a first. And a character that it's still hanging around, all these years later. I mean, that was 1997, right? And yeah, great run. Again, great run to read. So if you can find a lot or run for cheap, or you find them in a dollar bin, just pick up the run if you can. Spend $20 and read 20 issues. You got a whole weekend covered, if not more, if you're a slow reader like me. I like to slow down and appreciate the art and take breaks and stuff. Anyway, that all said, let's move over to Marvel for this week's releases, and we have Spider-Boy, issue 19. Basically, this is the penultimate issue of the run, because it says it's ending in issue 20. I don't know. I'm not personally keeping up with Spider-Boy because the character just didn't grab me. I'm not saying he's a bad character or anything like that. I just wasn't that interested to add this to my pull list on a monthly basis, because, we all got a budget, right? That said, and there are fun reads when I read them. And this one, interesting, facing off against Mr. Negative, and inside we do get a callback to a character who was kind of tied to his early origins, and that's Madame Monstrosity. Granted, he doesn't have a huge rogues gallery, but I gotta say, his rogues gallery is right there with Miles's, because they didn't really create a great rogues gallery for Miles Morales yet either. So let's see how this thing goes over time. But Madame Monstrosity, referenced here along with Mr. Negative years ago as part of his origins, is a character you can go find over that old school ASM run. So pretty fun steampunk look, Dr. Frankenstein, Lady of Dr. Frankenstein, whatever we want to call it. She's got an interesting look, interesting vibe. She's got all these creatures of humanoid animals helping support her staff. She first showed up in this huge Legacy 925 issue 31 of Amazing Spider-Man, back in 2023. I say huge because this book was 96 pages, I think, and it cost $10. So this had a $10 cover price on it, because it was basically previewing all of the Spider titles. We had previews for Spider-Woman, we had previews for Spider-Boy, previews for all these characters, and yada, 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 in the Spider-Verse. But in the back, there was an introduction to this character, Madame Monstrosity, here. And as you can see, there's those anthropomorphic characters I was mentioning before. It's like, this isn't Wonder Gore, but we do got a pig butler, we got a little mouse or gerbil dude, and we got a cat maid. I don't know. Weird stuff. But it's still kind of fun and interesting. And you can find it again for cheap, despite the fact that it's got a $10 cover price. Copies have sold for 30 cents. 2 bids, 30 cents. $2.47 on another auction there. Just saying, you can find this stuff for much cheaper than that $10 ask. Even copies listed are only asking $3.99, $3.75, $6. Well under the cover. And I'm only focusing in on this cover because, like most Marvel books of the last few years, there are multiple options, multiple cover options. It's hard to keep track. And if one stands out from the rest, I would point that out. But I'm just pointing out just the cover A for our nuts and bolts purposes here. So basic cover, cover A, that's what you're talking about, just a couple of bucks, despite the fact that it's got a $10 cover price. And you get first Madame Monstrosity, as well as a whole bunch of other stories and stuff in here. Granted, Gang War wasn't my favorite run in the main ASM title at this time, but there are a lot of little backup stories in this that make the pickup worthwhile. Now, one other book to cover for this week out of Marvel. Not a big Venom fan, but I figured let's take a look at Venom Original Sin. And it's not that I'm not a fan of Venom. I just venomed out. Just too much Venom. Venomize this extreme Venomverse, Spider-Verse mixing together. Just too much. That's all. That said, Venom Original Sin is like an anthology book. It's another bigger book. I think this costs, what, $7? $6.99 cover. And despite being on the cover here, inside one of the earlier issues, we have Jack-O-Lantern. I think we covered Jack-O-Lantern before, but you know what? For those who might not have watched that show, we can do it again. Multiple Jack-O-Lanterns over the years. So to try to keep on point with who I'm pretty sure are the ones that in these stories, in the early story issue, we have the Daniel Burkhart Jack-O-Lantern, who first appeared in comics as a version of Mysterio. That's right. This gets complicated because a lot of these characters take on multiple guises and multiple mantles, and it just gives you a headache when you think about it. But a later Mysterio eventually becomes a Jack-O-Lantern. Now, as Mysterio, Daniel Burkhart, the character Daniel Burkhart, again, as Mysterio, first showed all the way up back in 1974 in ASM 141. Now, this is going to be a tougher ask for you to find for cheap because this is, a 100s issue ASM. So a lot of places are going to have this for $5 to $10, no matter what's inside the book. That's going to be the case. But you go digging, who knows what you might find. I'm just pointing this out just to give you history on this character as well. So in November 1974, Mysterio right there on the cover, Mysterio inside this. This is actually not the OG Mysterio. This is the Daniel Burkhart character introduced here. This thing can even sell for, on the cheaper side, a little bit more expensive depending on condition and grade, etc. But look, copies can sell for as cheap as $8 or go up to like $25. Or asking prices could be as cheap as $6 for a good condition, which means it's going to be a little banged up. $25, MVS intact, Marvel Value Stamp, because this is Marvel Value Stamp territory. And then look at that one, $80 for a near mint minus. So basically, somebody looking for like a 9.0, a 9.2 wants $80, but you can get like maybe a 2.5 for $5.99. Raw, mind you. So again, that's what you can find online. I'm telling you, see what you can find near you at your LCS, at your discount shops, your half-price books, wherever you're doing your cheap comic hunting, yard sales, flea markets, whatever. This is the kind of stuff I'm saying. Just keep an eye out for it. You never know. That said, that was Burkhart as Mysterio, but we're not talking about Mysterio. We're here to talk about Jack-O-Lantern. So he doesn't take up the Jack-O-Lantern mantle until many years later. We're talking October 1996 in Spectacular Spider-Man issue 241. Not a great cover. Just saying it. It's just not my favorite. But inside here, just like that panel I just showed you, Jack-O-Lantern is there in their best Todd McFarlane-esque style because, everybody was aping the popular artists of the day. Everybody was trying to draw either like Todd or like Jim Lee or like Rob Liefeld. That's what comics were back in the 90s. Like the art styles were very reminiscent of those popular artists of the time. With that said, this book, very cheap. Copy sold $2.68. A lot of, more than half a dozen issues sold for 99 cents. That's a lot of like almost 10 issues there. Well, no, I'm sorry, 7 issues. Still, 7 issues for 99 cents. Copies listed $1.69, $2.99, $4.95. It's not a pricey book. It's one you can find out there if you want to get that first Burkhart as Jack-O-Lantern. Now, he's not even the only Jack-O-Lantern in this and the Original Sin book. Later in the issue, in a backup story, we see a different Jack-O-Lantern. I'm sorry, this is the magic of editing. We got rid of the little error there where I duplicated some panels, so we didn't need to go over that ASM book again. This is later in the issue, in another story inside this Original Sin, like kind of anthology book. Different Jack-O-Lantern. You see, this guy's got a lightsaber. Different style, different Jack-O-Lantern. This is the Jason Massendale Jack-O-Lantern, who first appeared as Jack-O-Lantern back in Machine Man. I think we talked about this book a while ago, and this one could be tough to find on a cheap budget, but you go looking. You never know. Final issue of Machine Man, issue 19, February 1981. On the cover and right inside the book, you're being introduced to the most merciless mercenary of all, Jack-O-Lantern. Okay. This book, like I said, it can get a little pricey, but it can also be very cheap. Look, copies sold $10 to $15. Yes. Copies listed you can find one. Starting bid $4.99. Doesn't mean you're going to get it for $4.99, but you can take a shot. A lot of copies listed more for like 15 bucks. Point being, you could find copies out there for a decent price depending on condition. I don't know what you're going to find. Just keep an eye on it, because this is actually an interesting book to find, because you're not only getting Jack-O-Lantern here, the first appearance of Jack-O-Lantern. Let's not forget that Massendale also takes on the mantle of Hobgoblin, one of the later Hobgoblins. As I said, some of these characters with their multiple mantles, etc., get more complicated, but he is also causing trouble in the current ASM run right now as Hobgoblin, right? So just fun stuff for you to go and dig for. Characters crisscrossing here, there, putting on different suits, putting on different masks. It may be hard to keep track of, but it makes the hunt fun. And with that all said, those are the books I got for you this week. Hopefully you found that fun. Hopefully you found that interesting. I appreciate you guys stopping by and checking this out. I'll have hopefully this going back on a normal schedule soon. I kind of like it here on Saturdays. It gives me a little bit extra time, and I'll drop this hopefully before the SNS boys go live with their show. If not, I'll drop it after. It'll depend on how long the edit takes. But with that all said, I'll see you all soon with some more content. All right, later.